In fact, it was the opposite, that Lovie Smith had kind of put the Texans in a bad place by not letting them get the number 1 overall pick. And they could have gotten Bryce Young and said they had to settle for CJ Stroud, which looks obviously very silly now. And then the other thing is, even if you thought he would be good, and I was indifferent on it, to be honest with you, I still kind of thought it's going to take a while. And my reasoning for that was, at Ohio State, every single receiver was a first-round pick. Both starting offensive tackles were starting offensive tackles in the NFL. Whereas with the Texans, I felt like they had a pedestrian receiving core coming into the year, if I'm being honest. And then, you also look at the O-line. It was banged up at the start of the year. I mean, a lot of those guys were injured. I thought this is a recipe for disaster. This guy had it easy at Ohio State. Now it's going to be real tough in the NFL, and that was not the case at all.
It certainly wasn't. Last game they played, obviously, was against the Mike McDonald-led defense in Baltimore. He is now one of the 8 new hires around the NFL. He'll be the Seahawks head coach. Dan Quinn closed the door on the openings today as he's the new Commanders head coach. Of the 8 that changed hands and have new leadership, do you have an expectation for one being better than the other in terms of, I think they're going to be able to win very quickly with this new head coach?
Oh, boy, I feel like I need to pull up all the teams with the new head coaches. They all kind of run together at times. Most of them I don't feel real good about because they don't have a great quarterback. You look at all the openings, all the guys that got fired, New England and Atlanta and Tennessee. I mean, what do they all have in common? They don't have a top 20 quarterback. So by that, I'll take Harbaugh and the Chargers. They're the ones that actually have a legitimate quarterback and give them a chance to have success. So I think it's hard to not go with the Chargers, given what the quarterback position means, as you guys obviously know all too well after how this season went in Houston.
We're talking to Ross Tucker here on Sports Talk 790. I asked Wex this earlier in the show, and I'll ask you the same thing. Are you surprised that we're not talking about Bill Belichick landing anywhere and he's not going to be on a sideline in the NFL for like the first time in a quarter century next season?
I am and I'm not. On the one hand, I am surprised because a lot of people, not me, but a lot of people consider him to be the greatest coach of all time. And you would think that if that guy is available, and 25% of the teams are making a change, you would think that at least one of them, right, would have really pushed hard to get him, including the fact that there's a great chance he would break the all-time record for wins with your franchise, which is kind of cool. And I think for franchises like Carolina, like Washington, I think he would have added sort of some much-needed credibility as one way I would look at it. But I'm not for 2 reasons. One is his track record just really isn't good without Tom Brady, and people have noticed that. And also fans are fickle, and he hasn't done much recently. So those are factors for sure. And then I guess the other one for me, people didn't want him, guys. I do these radio hits all over the country, whether I'm talking about my podcast or talking about myfrontpagestory.com or whatever. I was really taken aback by talking with the folks in Charlotte, in Atlanta, in Washington. Guys, they didn't want him. They did not want Belichick. And I would say out of the fans, it felt like maybe 25%, I was told, wanted Belichick. The rest did not. The rest did not want him. They wanted Ben Johnson, or they wanted somebody new and young or whatever. That's the part that's really interesting to me, is how many fans did not want him.
Yeah, I think that's something we hit on for the very same reason. They know him for what he's done recently. He had a team without a very good quarterback, which is likely the situation he was going into, and there weren't a lot of wins because of it. I wanted to take you inside the locker room a little bit because of the situation. Back to the Texans. The fact that they were able to keep Bobby Slowick, keep Gerard Johnson, presumably also keep Bill Lazor and Shane Day, and have the same four offensive coaches working with CJ Stroud into year two. You played for several NFL teams. You know what it's like as things change year to year. Are we underselling how important that will be for CJ moving in from year one to year two, or is it a pretty awesome way to start your off season?
You know, it is a pretty awesome way to start your off season, and it is surprising, very surprising, and rare. I'm surprised. I wish I know. I mean, you guys are down there. Do you think Slowick had a pretty good chance to get the job somewhere?
In Washington, yes. I think that was the only one where I truly thought, and I know he had 2 interviews in Carolina, but I thought because he and Adam Peters, the GM there, worked in San Francisco together for 6 years, the fact that I thought they might flip from the defense with Ron to an offense with Bobby, just in head coaching philosophy, was definitely real. But like Ben Johnson's now done back-to-back years, the situation he was in was good enough. A raise is nice enough for him to go with what he's got.
Yeah, it's that one I can understand because he knows he can do even more with Stroud this year. And to go from rookie year to second year, and this is his first year as a coordinator, so he can go into next year being thought of as one of the hot candidates, one of the top candidates, and maybe have his choice of 5 or 6 jobs next year. So that I can kind of understand. The one I really did not understand, and I'm surprised by, is Ben Johnson. You know, I know the Lions played really well, and they were that close to the Super Bowl, and he's hot right now. Man, it's a fickle thing. It is a really fickle thing, and that can change very, very quickly in the NFL. I'm really surprised that Ben Johnson did not take the Washington job because it felt like they wanted him and they thought they were getting him.
When you consider you've obviously been with the Ravens a little bit here this postseason, not only with the Ross Tucker Football Podcast that you can catch via the iHeartRadio app, same place you can find us. You were obviously on the call with Westwood One for the game against the Texans and the game they did not win. We were talking about the defense and Mike McDonald. I've been pretty loudly critical of Todd Monken, and I think it's the biggest reason why their offense did not do much against the Chiefs. All respect to Coach Spags, but I thought their game plan was awful for their game against the Chiefs. As you watched it unfold, were you wondering why they decided to pass all game long?
Yeah, I was surprised. I was on the sideline. I'm trying to figure out why. They did not have early success running it. The Chiefs went on 2 long touchdown drives early and controlled the time of possession and the clock. So I think the Ravens felt like they weren't going to get that many opportunities in the game. And then, you know, you're in a bad spot where they're down 10 at halftime, and I think they just weren't used to it. And I think they reacted poorly to it, really poorly to it, because I'd be so angry if I were a Ravens fan or player, because it's like they went away from why they were the best team in the NFL this year. You know, like, where was the design runs for Lamar, who had a couple against the Texans the week before? Where was the running game with Gus Edwards? That's the part that would really bother me.
Ross, real quick, just talking about the Texans moving forward, and I know it's way too early, but put your general manager hat on. What do you think is the number one thing they add, whether it's on offense or defense, to a team that had such a great rookie year from both CJ Stroud and DeMeco Ryans to take that next step and maybe get past a Baltimore in the postseason or whoever it may be in 2024?
Good question. You know, obviously, I think people don't always look at it this way, but one of the first things they need to do is keep Grenard, right? I mean, that would be a tough loss for them to lose him. I think, I'm curious how they feel about, the interior of their offensive line. Obviously I think they feel pretty good about Shaq Mason, but he's not getting any younger. Scruggs, I thought, was out of position at left guard in the playoffs. And so I think I wouldn't be surprised if you see them go pretty heavy interior O-line and interior D-line. I feel pretty good about their receivers right now with Tank Dell coming back and Nico. Obviously, I think it'd be nice if you could bring back Dalton Schultz. And Devin Singletary really played well for them. I think they'll trade Pierce. So I feel like interior O-line, interior D-line, and keeping some of these guys that are free agents. Fans never look at it that way. Fans always feel like, well, those are already our guys. Like that. No. Those guys no longer play for the Texans. Dalton Schultz, Devin Singletary, Rankins, Grenard, the linebackers, they don't play for the Houston Texans anymore. And so the first thing the Texans need to do is figure out what they can do to bring those guys back. I know they already made the first huge signing by bringing back John Weeks, the long snapper.
That's our guy.
It's a second segment in a row his name has been mentioned, believe it or not.
We love Weeksy.
That is, man, those guys, that's a good gig if you can get it. I wasn't good enough to do that, but that would have been nice. That's a great long career.
A year 15 in the NFL next year for John Weeks, all with the Houston Texans, and has played in every single game during that time. You mentioned earlier, Ross, that, and by the way, two dopes like us that are married could probably use advice on a nice Valentine's Day gift. After all, it's 13 days away. Tell us about myfrontpagestory.com.
Well, and you guys know most people don't even think about it, right, until February comes along, which is great because today's February 1st, so let's do it. Look, I've been married almost 20 years. I don't even, I'll say to my wife, you want to go out to dinner, or I'll send her flowers. I do think it's important that every once in a while, guys, you change it up. You surprise them. You do something special and unique that they're not ready for. That is myfrontpagestory.com. You literally talk to one of their writers for 10 minutes or whatever on the phone, tell them how great your significant other is. They write this incredible story with pictures, everything. Looks like it's on the cover of the newspaper, like the Houston Chronicle, framed, amazing. And as she's opening it, just being able to say, honey, I want to spell it for you, so I had a story written about you. That is so funny, it's not even funny. And I'll say this, too. If you guys end up doing this, myfrontpagestory.com, make sure you say to the writer, I just never thank her enough for all the little things she does. Even if you can't think of anything your wife does, just say that, because I've seen it. They cry almost every time. It's like next-gen stats, 95% crying rate if you say that. myfrontpagestory.com, myfrontpagestory.com.
Hey, Ross, we really appreciate the time. Undoubtedly, we will try to make our wives cry as well this Valentine's Day, and look forward to what you still have coming with one more football game to be a part of, the Super Bowl. So we appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me always, guys.
Ross Tucker, fantastic job on his podcast, the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, again via the iHeartRadio family of podcasts right there on the iHeartRadio app. Same place you can subscribe to our podcast, the A-Team, through Sports Talk 790. And if you want to catch a follow for Mr. Tucker, it's at Ross Tucker NFL. The best rookie season ever for a quarterback? That was a nice way to start the interview. Maybe we'll pick right back up there when we come back here on the A-Team.
Dylan Brooks here.